Okay, this is a video to describe the difference between direct variation, inverse variation, and we'll also use what's called joint variation, which is basically a double direct variation. Direct variation, we've discussed back in chapter 1, is really just a linear equation. It's this equation up here where y equals k times x. In most direct variation equations, the first thing you need to find is k, or what we call the constant of variation. So we're going to take the given information, given that x equals 2, times k, when y equals 12, we can find that k for this problem has to equal 6. That's one of the first things we'll be looking for when we go to write our answer. The second is actually just writing a model. So now that we know that k equals 6, y equals 6 times x is our model. And then we can go do the last part of the equation, find y when x equals 4. So y will be equal to 6 times 4, or basically a final answer of 24. Remember that it's not just that final answer we're looking for. It's finding k, setting up the model, and then actually writing down what y is equal to when x equals 4. The beautiful part is that inverse variation really works the same way. The difference here is that for direct variation, when x increases, so does y. When x is multiplied by k, y basically does whatever x does. So as x went from 2 to 4, y goes from 12 to 24. For inverse variation, x is in the denominator of a fraction. When the bottom of a fraction gets big, remember that the fraction as a whole, or what y is equal to, will get very small. But we started off the same way. Y is 12 when x is 2, which means if I multiply that 2 over to the other side, k will be equal to 24. I can then go write the model. Y equals 24 over x. And if I want to go find my answer, y equals 24 divided by x being 4. And what does y equal when x equals 4? Well, y equals 6. Again, find k, write the model, find the y. Joint variation really works the same way. It's just a double direct. Notice on the bottom we've got two things multiplied by k. So if they give us x, y, and z, we can then use that to find k and then go solve the equation. Pause the video now and see if you can follow the steps and try that out. Alright, hopefully you found, just as I did here, that once you plugged in 2 and 5, plugged in 50, you found k equal to 5. C equals 5xy. And therefore you can plug in your 4 and 13 and get 260. Now on the next screen I've got an example of inverse and direct variation sort of mixed together. Suppose your friends are purchasing a timeshare vacation home. The cost C for each person per week is $2,000 divided by the number of people P. So if we set up an equation for that, C equals the cost per week divided by the number of people. And this is just a good demonstration for what's the difference between W, which is a direct variation, and P, which is an inverse variation. Again, feel free to pause the video and think about the questions that are down below. Now that we've thought about those questions, what happens if people stay twice as long? Well, if we double the W, basically the top of the equation is multiplied by 2, and you've doubled the overall cost. If the number of people is tripled, on the other hand, notice we're dividing by 3, and you get 1/3 the cost. If both the time and the people are doubled, well, 2,000 times 2W over 2P, realize that those 2's are going to cancel, and really there is no change to the overall cost. Two great ways to reduce the cost by a half. Well, number one, invite half the people. Actually, sorry, take half the time. 1/2 the time cuts your cost in half. Or bring 2 times the people. If you double the people, everybody pays half as much. couple of things the book's going to have you do, or what many books will have you do, is identify whether or not equations are direct or inverse. The big idea is whether or not you can compare them to those basic equations. Notice here you have basically just a number times x, which makes this a direct equation. And if I wanted to identify k, well, it's 3 times x, k is 3. Notice over here we're not solved for y. So a good idea would be, let's do that right away. But now you'll notice that x is in the denominator, which makes this an inverse equation with a constant of variation of 0.75. And this last equation, notice it's not just multiplication or not just division, it's actually subtraction. So that qualifies us as neither. You also want to be able to go from words directly to equation. That'll help us when we do our word problems. So take a second to think about what those equations will look like. Alright, now that you've thought about what they look like, remember x varies inversely with y, which means y is in the denominator. W is going to be in the numerator as it's directly multiplied by k. Same thing on the bottom. Remember, jointly is like a double direct. So k times q times the square root of r, but inversely with the cube of s. So s cubed goes in the denominator. Lastly for you, we just have an application problem. So think about the problem. Realize that the key word when you're reading the equation or reading that problem is that it says inversely. So the number of songs that can be stored on an MP3 player varies inversely with the average size of a song. Think about how you could write out an equation for that problem or a model for that problem. First thing I would do is define what my variables are. Number of songs I'm going to define as n, and in order to save us from having to use s for actual song size, I'm just going to call it x. So song size will be x. And what this inverse idea says is that the number of songs varies inversely, right? So k divided by x. Now you can take your given information. There are 3,000 songs. When the songs are 5 megabytes in size, so k over 5. If you multiply 5 over to the other side, k ends equal to 15,000. And if you rewrite the model, n then equals 15,000 over x. And there is our model. Then, many times they're going to ask you to go ahead and use that model to solve an equation. So now, how many songs can I fit? Given that I know k is 15,000 with 2 megabytes in size on average, well, divide the numbers, get 7,500, and you now know that you can have 7,500 songs, assuming that they average 2 megabytes in size. Hope that helps you with direct and inverse variation, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck, and have fun.